Hey, greetings everyone. It is GleeCon, and we are back once again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we played through Shadowfang Keep, so we have now done half of the first batch of instances. So maybe for another venue, maybe on the next episode that I play while I'm running around talking, I'll break it down, but I'll kind of give a classic for those of you not fully in the know. I've done you might know, which dungeons came out with which expansion, but if you actually look at the change logs going on for each little update, you can kind of trace an interesting narrative of when they implemented each dungeon, at which pre-alpha and beta builds they rolled out those, and maybe on the next episode, which will probably be not until tomorrow because I have some off-camera work to do. It's possible, it's nay likely that next episode is going to be in the new studio. I should have everything getting together by tomorrow. We've also been reading the Dungeons and Dragons World of Warcraft series, and we're halfway through the monster guide, so stay a while and listen as we kick off the second half of the alphabet here with N for naga. Yeah, on the actual episode that we played Shadowfang Keep, and the lore of that, just as we touch on that, talked about basically it was helping us shut down Aragol. We didn't get a lot of lore because we had a carry for part of the dungeon, so anything that we would have talked with the first mini bosses, they kind of got wiped or just glossed over. But we did in the Book of quest. You do read a sizable werewolf lore. A pretty nice book. You could check it out on Wowpedia if you didn't catch the episode. And the most interesting thing about it is that it a lot of it's retconned it, or you can at least say that, hey, this guy was completely wrong, because he basically postulates that much like the Draenei, the Worgen come from their own planet, from a place far, far away, and maybe they get here magical means. Who knows? Maybe they have werewolf spaceships, but from Chronicles, we know that that's not the origin story of the werewolves. All right, here we go with Naga. It says this humanoid creature has a snake tail instead of legs. Its torso is that of a humanoid, but its head resembles that of a dragon. Large scales cover its body, and short spines descend along its back. It holds a stout spear in two hands. Naga are sinister Ophidian humanoids that dwell beneath the ocean. I do not know what Ophidian means. Maybe that's like a Latin base for snake-like, or maybe it's sort of like amphibian and they just spelled it wrong. Theirs is an ancient and mystical culture. For 10,000 years ago, they were Keldarai, night elves. During the War of the Ancients, a group of Keldarai called the Highborn sought to abuse arcane magic to bring demons to the world. This action led to the War of the Ancients, in which the night elves at great cost defeated the Burning Legion. The magical backlash shattered the world, imploded the Well of Eternity, and blasted the Highborn's capital city to the bottom of the ocean. Many Highborn joined their city on the ocean floor, where they would have drowned if a curse hadn't transformed them into the water-breathing Naga. And we know that curse is really a pact with the old gods. Naga culture is complex. A clear delineation exists between the sexes. Male Naga are larger and more muscular, reminiscent of dragons. Naga men serve as soldiers and guardians. Female Naga are more slender, with smaller scales and finer, more human-seeming faces. Naga women are natural spellcasters and rely on magic and poison to defeat their enemies. Naga men are more numerous, but as Naga consider their women to be magically and intellectually superior, their society is matriarchal. Women occupy most positions of leadership, and all Naga pay homage to their queen Ajara. The Naga capital is Nazjatar, in the eye beneath the maelstrom, but they can be found nearly anywhere. Several ranks and types of Naga exist. Naga Myrmidons and Royal Guards, for instance, are strong males and powerful melee fighters. Naga Sirens are female mages. Naga speak Naja. Some speak Nurglish and or Common, I guess to talk to their slaves. Naga are intelligent and use clever tactics against their foes. They possess no honor in warfare and attempt any strategy that gives them an advantage. They favor ambushes and pincer attacks. In groups, Naga send their Murgle slaves in first to soften up their enemies, while Myrmidons and Royal Guards support them. Naga sirens and other spellcasters remain in the back. Okay, so this is a playable race, unlike what they've done in the game, which I still beat the table for. They would be one of the coolest races if you added them in. Just figure out the mount problem and you're golden. But because of that, they're using a challenge rating 1 with an elite ability, right? And they're amphibious, not ophibious, or maybe not ophidian, or maybe both. So as characters, if you play a man, you gain a bonus to strength, but you lose intelligence and charisma. And as a woman, opposite, you gain intellect and charisma and lose strength. They're medium sized. They are slow on land, and of course, they are better in the water. Strong, and they're considered monsters, so like hold person doesn't work on them. They get extra armor. They are good at knowledge and spellcraft because they're still inundated in that lifestyle underwater. And they like to be mages and warriors. So by taking extra Nog levels, they get a kind of a medium-ish hit die and a D8. And eventually they can mutate by leveling up so close to the Well of Eternity, which can give them, if they're female, arcane aptitude, even more intellect, essentially. And arcane puissance, which gives them extra spell slots per day. Male or female can also grow claws. The females can grow extra arms, as you've fought some of them. They have those spindly, almost like a Shiva or Shivan, whatever they're called, that demon type. So they do less damage with them, and they lose constitution because they're putting them into their arms. Male mutations, they can grow even larger. Their scales can harden, and both types can have poison. Both types can get slippery, which makes them hard to catch. Females can also get a snake hair, which gives them extra. They're harder to surprise, and they can both get spell-like abilities. Can be anything as long as it's a level 1 spell. And then they have an increased swim speed as they level up. So those mutations are what they get from leveling up based on this table. All right, the Obsidian Destroyers. In terms of classic, these are just Ankaraji types of things that you can fight. Although once you get to Cataclysm, that template is also used throughout. Maybe, is it Uldum? Yeah. Their challenge rating 11. This creature is made of obsidian. It has a lower body resembling a powerfully built panther with a pair of great black wings protruding from its back, almost 20 feet wide. These latter appendages seem carved from old porous stone. The creature's upper body is humanoid. A pair of dazzling emerald eyes set within deep cavernous sockets stand out in the midst of the creature's shriveled skeletal face. There's also, I think actually they started toying with this idea in Warcraft 3 with those in the expansion when these things helped the Scourge. Born from the mystical transformation of an obsidian statue, this maybe that's going to come up next. This strange magical beast is drawn to mana. Because of its appearance, an unmoving obsidian destroyer can easily pass itself off as a statue as long as it keeps its eyes closed. It can thus fool people into believing it is nothing more than a harmless piece of decoration. Most obsidian destroyers enjoy wearing crowns and other ostentatious headdresses that make them appear regal. An obsidian destroyer almost always has see invisibility active. Since it can always see the auras of spells and magic items as its enemies approach, the creature makes good use of its greater dispel magic ability, frequently using it on a target as its first offensive action. Okay, so they strip magic. Though not a graceful flyer, an obsidian destroyer attacks from the air, targeting the weakest looking opponents first. Once engaged in melee, it takes full advantage of its Thunder Strike ability. If its enemies flee before it gets a kill, an obsidian destroyer pursues the slowest target relentlessly until it renders them helpless. They can freeze themselves so that they look like statues. They can pounce. They can read magic scene, just all the spell-like abilities we just talked about. They have a Thunder Strike. They channel the energy through their claws and then hit with a massive, like, thundering boom. If it is a crit, it hits everybody around them. They can also automatically once per day turn an attack into a crit. That's cool. They can sense magic and magical creatures as well. The obsidian statue, yeah, that's part B to this. The weaker version, actually, is challenge rating 9. Shaped like a humanoid torso atop the lower body of a winged, powerfully built panther, this large construct seems an impressively realistic likeness. Carved out of the dark stone from which it takes its name, an obsidian statue has eerie green eyes that shine brightly within deep sockets. Undead armies use obsidian statues as figureheads, placing them at the forefront of battle or near strategically important locales such as armies or headquarters. They inspire awe in the hearts of their enemies, but more importantly, they provide useful support to their undead masters. Obsidian statues do not speak. Obsidian statues fight without thought or tactic, using their mystic blasts to pummel those foes close to them. They hate living beings and strike at any living creature that comes within range. Obsidian statues never enrage undead in battle unless they are engage them unless they're directly threatened by them. They have a magical blast they can shoot. They have an essence of blight, so they just radiate blight around them. That gives temporary hit points to like undead around them. That harkens back to Warcraft 3 and their super essential role. They float above the ground. They can also morph into a destroyer. The thing that we just read about. That's cool. It takes time, but they can. And they have a spirit touch. They basically they restore the mana of the spellcasters. If it was Warcraft 3, you're giving spell slots back. All right, so we've now finished N's and O's in the old alphabet here. But yeah, I don't know if can remember seeing anything like that. I'm sure there might be some in World of Warcraft, but this is definitely Warcraft 3. Primal oozes. These are level 12. These are strong oozes. This clump of disgusting slime is brownish green. Pieces of bone and metal glint inside the creature, barely visible through the semi-transparent surface. Primal oozes are primitive creatures that may date back to the creation of life. They exude acidic digestive juices on their surface and into the air, feeding on any animal matter they encounter. Primal oozes are equally at home on land or in the water and have been known to climb trees or stone formations to drop on unsuspecting passersby. Primal oozes take the form of a 6-foot wide, 2-foot high lump of noxious goo. They weigh approximately 200 pounds. Maybe these are like the Ungoro crater version of the slimes. A primal ooze attacks any animal matter it encounters, using its acid attacks to partially digest a meal before it has even been subdued. Creatures that resist are pummeled to death with acid-covered pseudopods. Primal oozes pursue food relentlessly for as long as they can sense it. They also can burst with an acidic cloud that extends around them as a free action, so they're basically just going to always exude it. They have an acidic body, so if you strike them in melee, it's going to hurt. They can clone themselves, as we saw in the Wailing Caverns, because they are annoying as heck. And that's it for the primal oozes and for the P's. Okay, we're going to move on to Q's. Mind your P's and Q's. We're going to start with quillboar, probably one of the only ones in this book. I think there was some quetzals, or maybe those are, but that's from one of the other books. Quillboar is challenge rating 1, and the razor mains are challenge rating 2, so a little bit stronger. This squat humanoid's warty brown skin looks tough as leather. 2 short tusks sprout from either side of the creature's pig-like snout, which is set beneath 2 beady eyes. A thick mane of sharp quills spills down its back. A ferocious, suicidally brave race with an alien mentality and a slavish devotion to their tribe, quillboar defend their territory with a zeal bordering on fanaticism. They care only for ensuring the survival of their species, to the point where weaker quillboar gladly sacrifice themselves for the benefit of the others. Outsiders see quillboar as stupid, vicious, pig-like predators. In truth, quillboar possess a rigid social structure and deeply law-abiding personalities. The only laws they value, however, are their own. Quillboar are born with an instinctive drive to preserve their species. Quillboar always want more territory so that they may increase the size of their tribe. For this reason, they act like bullies, constantly threatening and harassing their neighbors. Due to the rigors of their society, quillboar offspring grow up quickly. A quillboar reaches maturity almost as soon as he can walk and hold a spear, usually about 3 years after birth. Quillboar mothers take no care to coddle their children, so sickly infants usually die. Quillboar do not form family units, the females compete for the attention of the strongest males, and the entire tribe tends to the infants. To form the best possible tribe, quillboar quash internal jealousies and rivalries harshly. All must cooperate to ensure the tribe's well-being. Quillboar males grow taller, heavier, and stronger than females. A typical quillboar. My little freak out. I have these moments sometimes because I've done it a couple times. A typical quillboar male grows to 5.5 feet tall and weighs 225 pounds. A typical female grows to 5 feet tall and weighs 150 pounds. For this reason, only males take up the path of warrior. Females feel no resentment over this fact, and indeed the males do not see themselves as superior. For the tribe to survive, the quillboar must breed, and the females must bear and protect worthy offspring. Each member has his or her role in the tribal structure. Female quillboar possess such strong tribal instincts that most do not even desire to follow the male's path. On occasion, a female child displays such unnatural strength that the shaman deems her a man. She then trains as a warrior and lives in all ways like a male, even taking female mates. Tribal legend holds that such unions have occasionally produced an exceptional quillboar warrior, though no scholar has confirmed the tale, so there is little or no stigma attached to such situations. How? How are the two females making a baby? Weak, crippled, and elderly quillboar who feel they can no longer aid the tribe seek death. Quillboar have no need to execute their infirm. The elderly destroy themselves out of a desire to aid the tribe. Most seek death in battle, but when doing so is not an option, they take their own lives by wandering into the wilderness, hoping to slay at least one beast that may have posed some threat to the tribe. Quillboar do not frown upon this ritual form of suicide. Rather, the tribe views it as an act of bravery and devotion. In fact, quillboar tribes often hold festive ceremonies when a member announces his intention of taking the walk in honor of the coming sacrifice. Females almost always commit ritual suicide once past childbearing age. Jeez. Quillboar believe that their afterlife holds security and comfort for their race. They enter a realm where all the land belongs to the quillboar and no enemies seek to destroy them. All fight with strength and bravery, battling monsters and prey for amusement. Quillboar revere Agamagan, an ancient boar-like eternal associated with the Night Elves, believing him to be the progenitor of their race. Where his blood spilled, it is told, patches of enormous briars sprouted to serve as homes to the quillboar. These dens still exist. That part of the lore I knew. Almost everything else we've been reading is news to me. Quillboar shaman teach that the law of the wild is the standard by which all tribal members must live, survival of the fittest. When a predator culls the weak from the herd, it is cause for celebration. Those that die do so gladly, knowing that even in death they have contributed to the success of the battle of the tribe. Despite their low intelligence, quillboar possess good common sense. At least one quillboar every generation walks the path of the shaman. That makes me feel bad for killing so many of them. Quillboar never seek to become shaman, but if you were awarded the right to study with their elders when visited by dreams of former shaman now deceased, shaman usually rise to positions of power and leadership within their tribes. Most often it is males that receive the dream vision that sets them on the shaman's path, although female shaman are not uncommon. There you go. There's a little poetry there. Though omnivorous, quillboar prefer the taste of meat. Quillboar speak common. Quillboar fight best in packs. Their quick charges and frenzied battle cries lead enemies to believe the quillboar are reckless and disorganized, but in reality they use solid tactics. Quillboar flank whenever possible and make use of the aid another action to take down particularly difficult opponents. They never retreat, seeing such an action as a sign of weakness. And the level 1 that we see the quillboar, it's a level 1 elite array because it's a playable class or race that could have pack fighting. So they get extra, they're better when they fight near friends. And they have quills. So they can actually use their quills as a weapon. I don't know, I guess they lash their head around. Now the Razormane quillboar from the Razormane tribe are bigger and meaner than the other quillboar. They gain extra bonuses to survival, which is essentially tracking. If you take quillboar levels, you gain extra stamina, strength, some pack fighting buffs, feats, tribal defense, death boon. I'm assuming we're going to read about some of those. All right, so as characters, they gain Bonuses to strength and stamina, but big penalties to intellect and charisma. The pack fighting is that extra bonus to fighting near their allies. They get the quills. They like to be barbarians. Now, when they take levels of quillboar, they can gain greater pack fighting, which just ups the passive bonus. They get an extra bonus feat from warrior bonus feats. Tribal defense. Um, when they flank, they gain extra and double the attack bonus. As a death boon, when they die, everyone around them gains a big strength buff. The stronger the dead quillboar, the better the buff. And then it's supreme pack fighting that they just keep going like stronger and stronger. So like a party of quillboars would actually be tough. All right, we're now moving on to the R's with the Risen. I'm guessing Risen, it looks like we're just talking about undead, skeletons, zombies, maybe too. They can be anything from tiny to colossal. The Risen are skeletal guardians created from the bones and corpses of dead warriors. Unlike a typical skeletal soldier, Risen are exceptionally tough and resistant to damage. They also retain the fighting skills they had in life, so they make excellent guards, defenders, or skirmishers. Risen often accompany columns of ordinary skeletons into battle. Risen typically wear plate or chain armor, although it is often ragged and poorly maintained. Some of the more powerful Risen are garbed in magic armor and given magic weapons. Okay, so it's basically a template where they keep their size, their hit dice improves. The speed doesn't change unless they had wings because they won't be able to fly. They gain extra armor class because they're, I guess, just made of bones now. With the hit dice based on their size, the damage is now if they either weapons or based on their claws, which is based on their size. So an example, Risen Warrior. Actually, let's finish. They also gain damage resistance to bludgeoning, which is the opposite of regular D&D, where they're weak against bludgeoning, or maybe that's Diablo. They're immune to cold. They're harder to turn. They have extra hit points due to unholy toughness. They get a huge bonus to strength and agility, but they have no stamina score and intellect and charisma of 1. So they basically become mindless and hit points don't matter. They are good at fortitude, reflex, but poor at will. That's the simplified saving throws. It used to just be fortitude, reflex, and will. During this iteration of Dungeons and Dragons, now you get a saving throw for each stat. They don't have skills. They lose all their feats, but they can get some warrior feats. That's it. They're usually evil, and they can just gain extra warriors. So they're pure fighters. That's it. The skeleton before you is dressed in surprisingly effective-looking leather armor and wields a sharp blade. It advances purposefully, eye sockets glowing, a malevolent red. This Risen was once a powerful fighter. When raised from the dead, all his fighting abilities were left intact. The creature now fights to serve its necromantic master, using everything it learned about combat in life to full advantage on death. Although virtually mindless, a Risen retains a high degree of cunning regarding combat, always employing feats to the best of its ability. For example, a Risen knows that unarmored or lightly armored targets are prime candidates for power attacks, but does not often use the power attack feat against heavily armored foes. All right. So here we have the rock borers. These are large magical earth beasts with a challenge rating of 7. We see these underground. This sinuous creature looks to be some kind of snake, but it undulates more like an inchworm. Its body is layered in thick scales, and the mandibles jutting forth from its mouth gleam with foul-looking ichor. Rock borers are rare worm-like beasts that dwell underground in dry, rocky areas. They dig narrow, barely noticeable layers and lurk near natural caves and passageways, bursting forth when they sense any sort of motion passing by their hiding place. As a result, they almost always attack with surprise. I think we've seen them so far pretty much just in Ragefire Chasm. Rock borers are normally slow-moving, patient creatures, except when disturbed or when hunting. They're stationary for over 90% of their lives, generally moving only to mate or seek a new place to lurk in wait for food. Only when exceptionally hungry do they actively hunt. A starving rock borer attacks anything that moves. A typical rock borer is 20 to 25 feet long, about a foot in diameter, and weighs about 400 pounds. Rock boars almost never stretch out to their full length, instead coiling their hind end or leaving it in the ground and raising the forward portion of their body up in the shape of an S. This and their thinness makes them look smaller than they actually are, allowing them to sometimes surprise opponents with their exceptional reach. I feel like the ones in Ragefire Chasm were smaller than that. Rock boars prefer to lie in wait for prey to pass by before bursting from their holes. While lurking, they are almost impossible to detect. Although, depending on the terrain and lighting, an explorer might identify their presence by the small, largely refilled tunnels they leave behind when burrowing. Once out of their holes, or if encountered while on the move, rock boars try to back into corners where their superior reach gives them the advantage. If hard pressed, they retreat by burrowing. Rock borers lurking in groups within individual burrows can't communicate with each other, keeping their holes some distance apart. Thus, an attack typically commences with no more than one or two of the nearest borers bursting forth to attack passersby. In the following round or two, the remaining borers may join the fight, having been alerted by the sudden onslaught of their fellows. A rock borer can use its burrow speed even through the hardest of natural stones, since its acid softens the stone momentarily as the borer passes through. They can glob acid at the enemy, softening their armor and doing damage. And they can also burst forth. It basically allows them to bust out of the rock and do a concealed attack. All right, now we're moving on to S's with satyrs. Satyrs give us a challenge rating 1, but look, we have a table, so it's because you could hypothetically make a PC satyr. I mean, they're pure evil. I don't know, they would easily be made into a playable class. I see no reason why not, other than the fact that they're pure evil. This creature looks somewhat like a night elf, but it has shaggy goat legs, hooves, and a long tail like a lion's. Tall horns sprout from its head. Okay. In the War of the Ancients, the Burning Legion's taint worked strangely on some night elves, corrupting them into satyrs. In the years since, other races have also joined their ranks. Other races have. We know that that's part of a corruption granted by the Burning Legion, because they're essentially night elf agents of the Burning Legion. Satyrs resemble the creatures they once were, but much of the resemblance ends at the physical level. Satyrs are bloodthirsty, depraved individuals who enjoy slicing open their opponents with curved blades and flinging entrails everywhere. Satyrs operate at a faster level than other creatures, whereas night elves, for example, are serene and languid. Satyrs move sharply and talk quickly. They tend to function as if their heart races and metabolisms operate at 2 or 3 times normal speed, which may be precisely the case. Though satyrs are immortal, rumors tell of certain satyrs that apparently burn out and die at ages much younger than that of night elves. Satyrs consider Lord Xavius to be their patron. Xavius, once a night elf who worshipped and served Sargeras, was the first satyr and was instrumental in bringing the Burning Legion to Azeroth in the War of the Ancients. One of Xavius' powers was the ability to afflict other creatures with his affliction, turning them into satyrs. History says Xavius perished 10,000 years ago, but the satyrs still revere him as their creator and patron. And I'm a little bit hazy on that book. I feel like the door is open. He might be dead, but I think he could be brought back. Satyr are crazed fighters, but possessed of a dark cunning. Satyrs are tricksters and rogues and prefer to strike from ambush to inflict as much pain and damage as possible. They strike for vulnerable points and enjoy causing their enemies pain, both physical and psychological, before finishing them. Satyrs, like all demons, despise night elves and attack them first. Okay, so they're evil. They are more agile, but they lose spirit and charisma. They're technically an outsider, so basically they're treated like a demon. They have dark vision. They fight with claws if they don't use weapons. They are good at scouting and living in nature and sneaking. They're immortal, much like night elves. They know Eridune plus whatever their race, their language and life was. They like to be rogues most, but we've seen them do other things. As a player character, they have the D8 rogue style hit die, and they gain backstabbing. And let's see what else they gain. Yeah, so they have backstab just like a rogue, no matter what their class is. They are extra stealthy. They can use shadow meld like the night elf. They have finesse, which means that they can. Nowadays, finesse weapons are just a a trait any weapon has, but I guess back then you used to have to have it as a feat where you could use your dex instead of your strength. Wild Rush is it lets them charge and make a full attack. So basically they have a lower chance to hit and they replace it for extra attacks. All right, Scorpids now. Scorpids are magical beasts. I didn't realize that. I thought they were just creatures out there in the world. There are regular Scorpids and the Dune Stalkers, challenge ratings 3 and 6, respectively. Mottled black markings cover this over-large scorpion's bone-white carapace. Two giant claws click menacingly as it skitters forward, balanced by a curving, stinger-tipped tail. Scorpids are quick, vicious, poisonous predators who stalk sand dunes in search of prey. Scorpids possess a strong racial identity. They band together to fight interlopers, form family units called nests, and willingly ally with other scorpids. I guess if you think about, like, I think you could fight like some scorpid brood mothers or something like that, but they have little baby scorpids that follow them and fight them, which would not be typical insect behavior. Look at those teeth. They're like almost human-like teeth. Scorpids eat meat, including carrion, but prefer freshly killed food. They live underground, digging burrows in soft sand or earth. Scorpid females are indistinguishable from males to the naked eye, but after giving birth, the scorpid female carries her young on her back until they're old enough to fend for themselves, a period of 2 to 3 weeks. On average, a scorpid female gives birth 10 to 20 live young at a time, each one no bigger than a rat. Scorpid young routinely molt, shedding their old soft skin and growing a harder carapace in its place. Scorpids molt 5 to 6 times before reaching maturity. Cautious travelers watch for shed scorpid skins when traveling in the desert. Yeah, I wonder if there's like some like ambient graphics that shows like little scorpid skins. If you turn your graphic settings all the way to the max. Scorpids grow to about 3.5 feet in length and 2.5 feet tall. They are heavy for their size, weighing almost 60 pounds when fully grown. Scorpids come in many colors, including black, yellowish brown, red, and a mottled white that blends with moonlit desert dunes. A strange quality of the scorpid's carapace causes it to fluoresce weakly in certain underground environments, such as an area with phosphorescent plants, moss, or fungi. Scorpids live an average of 30 years. Solitary scorpids retreat and seek out assistance if they know a fellow scorpid is close enough to render aid. Scorpids, so they run. I will have to pay attention to their tactics. Scorpids always try to attack in groups if they can. As many scorpids as possible target an individual in combat before moving on to a new enemy. Scorpids can opt not to poison an enemy when making a sting attack, but they rarely choose to do so. Sometimes those scorpid groups reserve their poison and make non-lethal attacks to subdue weak enemies. They then drag the unconscious back to the nest to reach their young to kill. What's their intelligence? Intelligence of 4, so I guess they're smarter than the average animal. They have poison, sting. They are resistant to poison, and they're good at sneaking. Dune stalkers are a more powerful version of a scorpion, growing to 5 feet in length and 3.5 feet tall and weighing close to 600 pounds. The strongest usually serves as a nest's leader. Dune stalkers are swift, silent killers using stealth and sneak attacks to great attack, and thus they gain a backstab in addition to other things. All right, are on to shades. This is a challenge rating 1 because I wonder if this is going to become a template or are they just weak. A vaporous gray mist clearly forms the skeletal body of this creature. Its vaguely humanoid body is translucent and leaves a misty trail as it glides silently about. Only the bright violet eyes, which burn with great intensity, look as though they have any substance. Shades are the restless spirits of those who never had a chance to achieve greatness in life. These utterly invisible and corporeal creatures can see all things for what they truly are. Quiet and discreet, shades prefer to avoid living beings. They seem content to roam the land where they respawn, but most seem also equally at ease among other undead. These intelligent creatures sometimes serve in undead armies as scouts or spies, reporting anything they see to their superiors. Yeah, this is from Warcraft 3. And throughout. They're throughout the game now. Once they enter the service, shades almost invariably remain loyal to their superiors and their cause. Because of the shades' unquestioning loyalty, many undead generals seek to employ them despite their lack of courage or fighting abilities. Poor combatants, shades prefer to avoid combat as much as possible. They would rather flee than face an enemy they cannot hope to defeat. But they also tend to retreat from creatures they could likely defeat. So this is not a template, they're just weak. When forced into battle, they use their spirit drain ability to hamper the living, but will still seek to fly away at the first opportunity. Cornered shades fight to the death, but note that incorporeal creatures are notoriously hard to corner. They spirit drain for very weak damage, but it does damage your spirit, which is essentially your wisdom. They, of course, can be invisible, permanently invisible, with greater invisibility, and they have true sight, so they're good scouts. All right, now we're on to the silithid, which is an entire category of creatures. So we're going to have multiple different silithid throughout this. Silithid are an unintelligent insectoid race that have grown in strength and power in recent years. They first appeared in the region called Silithus, but have since founded colonies in neighboring areas, usually far from native settlements. They sometimes prove impartial to travelers, but defend their territory ferociously from invaders. Scholars disagree on the origins of the Silithid. Some believe they are an offshoot of the Arachnithid, an insect race that mostly dwells in the northern regions of Azeroth. Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. Others believe they are a new race, heretofore unknown on Azeroth, possibly having arrived from another world elsewhere in the Twisting Nether, much as the Orcs once did. Still others posit that they are servants of the Kiraji, and that their presence in southern Kalimdor is a harbinger of an impending Kiraji invasion. To humanoids' eyes, silithid are enormous bugs, most of man-size or larger, with powerful natural weapons at their disposal. They do not seem to use tools, although they do build structures out of natural materials using their bodily secretions. Silithid hives are immense alien affairs with towering antenna-like spires jutting out of the earth. In the maze of tunnels below, the creatures raise their young, tend to their wounded, manage food storage, and fend off invaders. Most scholars agree that a silithid begins life by hatching from an egg. At this point, the young silithid is a broodling, a larval state as yet unspecialized for any role in the hive. Eventually, the broodling encases itself in a cocoon and changes into its new form, a wasp, reaver, swarmer, or possibly some other as yet unknown type of silithid. While silithid haven't been a visible part of the world long enough for anyone to accurately gauge their lifespan, some researchers think that after achieving adulthood, a common silithid can live for up to 5 years, although queens can survive for decades. Silithid are capable of communicating by touching antennae to one another. They can also send simple messages to larger groups by sending out chemical signals in the air. Individual silithid possess a certain level of animal cunning but are unintelligent. They exist to serve the hive and are specialized in their roles. Wasps attack, tunnelers dig, reavers defend, swarmers train, queens lay eggs, and so on. A silithid instinctively gives its life for the colony. Alright, so the reavers are challenge rating 6. The chitin of this warrior insect is dark blue with black stripes, although it shows something that's like yellowish green. 2 slashing claws jut out from the angular body like deadly blades. Silithid reavers are the hive's primary defenders. They dwell mostly underground or near tunnel entrances, using their dark vision and scent to ferret out intruders. Reavers are defensive by nature and spend most of their lives guarding a particular area or section of the tunnel. They do not advance beyond their patrol area to attack and might seem non-threatening until one gets too close. An average reaver is 8 feet long and 5 feet tall, weighing 350 pounds. Reavers are tenacious fighters. They exist only to defend their hive and do so at all costs. They typically go after the most dangerous opponent first, then move on to the next most threatening target once they have removed the first threat. If attacked in a burrow, they take up a defensive position where they can strike at anyone who tries to slip by. If need be, they try to grapple particularly dangerous opponents, holding a foe down while other reavers move in for the kill. So they have reaving, which lets them slice both claws, and if they hit, then they gain a third attack, and they have extra crit. Because of their legs, they're hard to push with stability. They have a tunnel defense, so they gain big extra bonuses to strength and stamina when defending their tunnel. They're also decent scouts. So there's silithid swarmers, which are challenge rating 6, or the weaker version, the silithid broodling swarm. So the challenge rating 4. This scorpion-like creature has a turquoise body with huge claws clacking at the air. Silithid swarmers carry young silithid. Underneath its shell, a swarmer carries a cluster of broodlings, protecting them with its body. When the swarmer locates its prey, it releases its broodlings so that they may learn how to fight. Should the need arise, the broodlings can retreat back under the swarmer's shell for complete protection. Typical swarmers are 8 feet long and stand 5 feet high. They weigh upwards of 500 pounds. A swarmer can communicate with other silithid by using its antennae. Swarmers enter combat cautiously, assessing the threat posed by their foes before releasing a brood. If the enemy proves too dangerous, the swarmer spits acid and retreats. Otherwise, it releases its brood into the fray, directing it towards specific targets with a series of clicking sounds. The swarmer's challenge rating includes a single broodling swarm. Gotcha. Spit acid is their main thing, and then they have the release swarm action, and the swarm can like come back into its body, I guess. Now, for the silithid broodling swarm, these insects resemble ant larvae, though quite small in size, perhaps the size of a big rat. They possess vicious-looking mandibles. Broodlings are young silithid that have yet to molt into their adult forms. Broodlings look identical but can potentially grow into wasps, reavers, or any other silithid type, even queens if the hive needs another. They're seldom encountered without a swarmer as their escort. They're about 1 foot long and weigh about 2 pounds. Broodlings attack according to the orders of the swarmer that carries them. Faced with multiple opponents, they attack as many as they can unless ordered otherwise. Broodlings that show tenacity often grow into reavers, while those that strike quickly eventually metamorphose into wasps. Those with less combat ability become swarmers or possibly some other type of silithid. And we'll see, it says see below for more information on swarms. Maybe that's like a whole category. All right, the silithid wasp is a challenge rating 5. This man-sized insect hovers on bluish-green iridescent wings. Its body is dark blue with black striping with a wicked-looking black stinger at the base of the abdomen. Silithid wasps are the mobile attack force of a hive, patrolling the territory's borders and ruthlessly driving out intruders. They are fearless combatants who willingly sacrifice themselves to bring down a foe. Wasps begin learning to fly from the moment they molt out of their broodling state and use their mobility in combat to great advantage. Although a wasp has legs for perching while the creature rests, they are useless for ambulation. Silithid wasps emit a telltale droning sound when flying or hovering. The sound increases dramatically as more wasps add to the formation. A large squadron of silithid wasps can be heard up to half a mile away, depending on ambient noise. Silithid wasps are 7 to 8 feet long and weigh 150 pounds. Silithid wasps attempt to sting their opponents into submission. If a foe is not directly threatening the hive, the wasp makes flyby attacks or simply attempts to herd the enemy out of silithid territory. If the danger to the hive is great, the wasp's attacks become more desperate, finally culminating in a last-ditch suicide sting that ends the wasp's life. So it has a poison and it has the suicide sting, which gives them extra damage, but they're also more easy to hit. And if they're successful, it does double damage. Okay, that's the silithid. I guess we're not going to read about the... Well, it said... I can't remember. I felt like there was a few different kinds. Yeah, I guess we're not going to read about the queens or the tunnelers. Just the combat version ones. Alright, skeletal creatures. I guess different from risen. Weaker than risen. And this is just a template again. A skeletal creature is the reanimated bone structure of a formerly living creature. Necromantic magic powers the skeleton, forcing it back into a parody of its living self. Most skeletons are mindless automatons, servants of necromancers or other spellcasters, but a few possess some degree of sentience and free will. A skeleton is seldom garbed in anything more than the rotting remnants of any clothing or armor it was wearing when slain. A mindless skeleton does only what it is ordered to do. It can draw no conclusions of its own, and it has no initiative. Because of this limitation, its instructions must always be simple. A skeleton ordered to attack does so without pause and fights until destroyed. Alright, so when you create a skeleton, you keep its size. The hit die becomes the good one of the HD. They lose the flight ability if they had it. They gain a bonus to armor class because they are bones. They fight with their weapons or their claws based on their size. They can... If they had spells, they can now hurl flames. That's about it. They can't do more complicated magic, though. They do gain the damage reduction to bludgeoning attacks, immunity to cold. The saves... Oh, they're good at will, but bad at fortitude and reflex, kind of the opposite of the risen. They gain extra agility, and the rest of their stats get, like, perma-nerfed because they're mindless now. Sentient skeletons, sidebar. Every so often, a skeleton retains its intellect or develops sentience over long years of undeath. No one has been able to create this circumstance intentionally, nor does anyone understand why or how it happens. Skeletons that retain their sentience keep the intellect, spirit, and charisma scores of the base creature. They also retain the skills and feats of the base creature and also gain improved initiative as a bonus feat. Their base attack bonus equals that of the base creature, and if they could cast spells, they can still do so as skeletons, but they also gain the Hurl Flames ability. They will still lose all of their special attacks and qualities of the base creature, and therefore they keep the challenge rating of their original class. Interesting. I'm trying to think of an example that's not a Risen or a Lich. This grimy skeleton, this is a sample skeleton warrior. This grimy skeleton clutches a rusty longsword and battered shield. Its bones rattle inside a breastplate much too large for its fleshless frame. Skeletal warriors are the reanimated bones of humanoid warriors. More powerful and experienced warriors become more powerful skeletal warriors. On the battlefields of Azeroth, skeletal warriors are a common sight when necromancers are about. Skeletal warriors are mindless, attacking only as their masters direct them. Most necromancers use skeletal warriors as guardians and frontline troops to damage the enemy before more powerful creatures enter the battle. They are non-elite. Now we're jumping right to succubus, which could also be incubus. I mean, I feel like they could use the same slot, but maybe we already did incubus. So there's succubus, or this is probably the demon form that you fight, whereas you don't really fight incubi. There's the succubus and the more advanced queen of suffering. Succubi are just level 5, but the queens are 14. A stunningly beautiful woman stands before you. Her voluptuous form is squeezed into a tight leather bodice. Large bat wings unfurl from her back, and she lets out a short gasp as she cracks a small whip against her milky thigh. A succubus is pleasure and pain rolled into one deadly package. Like all demons, she enjoys bringing death and misery to the mortal races, but that doesn't mean she can't have fun with them first. Many warlocks choose a succubus as a fell companion for their ability to manipulate those weak of will. It is not uncommon for a succubus in a mortal's servitude to fall uncontrollably in love with him or her. This occurrence is not always to the master's advantage, though, for a devoted succubus can be prone to fits of extreme jealousy, especially when her master deals with those of the opposite sex. Succubi speak Eredun, and most also speak Common. A succubus usually tries to avoid direct confrontation, preferring instead to use her natural and supernatural charm to gain a creature's trust, then to lure her victim into a defenseless position. In open combat, a succubus is far from helpless, however. She is surprisingly agile, always attempting to feint or flank an opponent, thus allowing her to backstab with her lash of pain. Most warlocks tend to trust their succubus's natural instincts in combat. This trust comes as much from respect for her abilities as it does from the realization that a succubus may ignore an order she doesn't agree with anyway. This is especially true when the opponent threatens her master directly, as she may become reckless trying to save him. She can backstab. She has a lash of pain. She can also use soothe, which basically I think it's like a threat reduction thing. They have to, in the D&D, it makes someone have to choose another target instead of attacking her. She can detect good, charm, all like enchantment type spells, and she has spell resistance. I'm still trying to devise when you'd want to use one other than in the demonic sacrifice build. A queen of suffering's beauty and seductiveness tempts even other immortals. Treated royalty among succubi as royalty among other succubi, she commands both love and respect from her lesser cousins. She often travels with a small coven of devoted succubus followers, serving as both her students and handmaids. To a queen of suffering, there is no greater insult than to be dominated by a mortal, and she cruelly punishes any warlock she finds controlling a succubus fell companion. Her lash of pain is stronger. She is harder to resist soothe. She can also dominate person. Whenever she hits with a lash of pain, she can also stun, and she has a stronger spell resistance. All right, now we have swarms. So this was a category that we were going to get to. Swarms are dense masses of fine, diminutive, or tiny creatures that would not be particularly dangerous in small groups, but can be terrible foes when gathered in sufficient numbers. For game purposes, a swarm is treated as a single creature with a space of 10 feet. A swarm has a single pool of hit dice and hit points, a single initiative modifier, a single speed, and a single armor class. It makes saving throws as a single creature. Many different creatures can mass as swarms, but bat swarms and rat swarms are described here. while centipede swarms, locust swarms, and spider swarms appear in the web extras. The swarm's type varies with the nature of the component creature. Those given here are all animals or vermin, but all swarms have the swarm subtyped. A swarm of tiny creatures consists of about 300 non-flying creatures or 1,000 flying creatures. A swarm of diminutive creatures consists of roughly 1,500 non-flying creatures. The first was tiny, or 5,000 flying. A swarm of fine creatures consists of perhaps 10,000 creatures flying or not. Swarms of non-flying creatures include many more creatures than can normally fit in a 10-foot square space based on their normal space, because creatures in a swarm are packed tightly together and generally crawl over each other and their prey when moving or attacking. Large swarms are represented by multiples of single swarms. In order to attack, a swarm simply moves into opponent's spaces, which provokes an attack of opportunity. The swarm can occupy the same space as a creature of any size, since it crawls all over its prey, but effectively remains a creature with a 10-foot space. Swarms never make attacks of opportunity, but they can provoke attacks of opportunity. Unlike other creatures with a 10-foot space, a swarm is shapeable. That is, it can occupy any 4 contiguous squares, and it can squeeze through any space large enough to contain just one of its component creatures. Swarms are difficult to fight with physical attacks, however, they have a few special vulnerabilities as follows. A lit torch deals extra damage to them. Or just deals damage, because normally I guess it wouldn't. A weapon that is flaming automatically does its full damage, so they're weak against fire. They can also use lanterns as an improvised weapon. So in short, they're weak against regular fire. So bat swarms are challenge rating 2. A mass of teeming, squeaking bats wheels and descends. A bat swarm is nocturnal, never found above ground in daylight. A bat swarm seeks to surround and attack any warm-blooded prey it encounters. The swarm deals 1d6 points of damage to any creature whose space it occupies at the end of its move. It's also distracting, so it nauseates the people around them. They're like, ew, gross, there's bats everywhere. Wounding means that they, while you are hit by them, after you get hit by them, you still bleed out slowly until you're healed. They also have blind sense, and they're good at spotting. Rat swarms are just as strong, challenge rating 2. A mass of teeming, squeaking rats swarms across the ground. Rat swarms are infamous for dwelling in disease-ridden sewers, but are equally at home in almost all environments. A rat swarm seeks to surround and attack any warm-blooded prey it encounters. A swarm deals 1 to 6 points of damage to any creature whose space it occupies at the end of its move. It has disease, filth fever. It's also distracting, and it's a little better at sneaking around. All right, and that is the end of S's, and that's where we're going to stop on this episode today. So we learned some interesting things, and we're plugging away here through the book. But we have another episode in the pipe, 5x5. Thank you, as always, everyone, so much for watching, for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.